Hello everybody, welcome back to another video with me, Nikki, where we sew things for our friends and family. I walk you through those real-time tutorials where you sew things, accessories for yourselves and others. All right, so today's video is going to be a how-to. We're not sewing a project today. I'm simply going to explain the concept of quilting to you. So, what's quilting? Not actually like quilting a blanket. Not that kind of quilting. Quilting today is going to be us talking about this. Okay? So, we all know that very famous person, well-known person, who started off with a line of bags and things that we didn't see before. We didn't see in the stores, okay? So it was cotton material, cotton fabric, regular cotton. Inside was, a type of fleece or batting, I should say. And then what was happening was that this person decided that she was going to quilt all of her items. So all of the bags, totes, zipper pouches, everything. And that became her signature mark. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about quilting of products. All right. So when you have cotton material, obviously, you know how 100% cotton material feels. It's durable, however, it shifts, it moves around. It's not as heavy as canvas material or like home decor that you can use for bags. You could also use vinyl for bags, faux leather, etc., 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 etc. Those materials are thicker, okay? So with cotton material, because it's thinner, cotton tends to move and shift, okay? I'm just working with some scraps today, okay? Cotton, it's thin. You need something to help make it stiff and stand up, okay? And actually be durable, okay? So there are several different types of interfaces or battings that you can put inside of a product, okay? This one as an example, okay? This feels foamy. So I'm going to assume, I could be wrong, but I'm going to assume it's Fusible Fleece inside of here, okay? It's squishy. It's not thin like Pellon. Okay, it's meant to give body to the bag because this here is regular cotton inside, okay, with no interface, okay? But when I feel this, I feel it's poofy, it's squishy, okay? So the reason that quilting is done is to stabilize what's inside of there. And I'm going to explain that right now by showing you. What I'm going to do, you see here, notice that there's an outer layer of cotton material. Inside, there's a layer of cotton material as well. Okay, that's the lining. Okay, so of course this part has it as well, but we're just focusing on this just because I can bend and move this. Okay, never mind the binding right now that's here. We're talking about cotton. Then we know there's some sort of interface inside. And then we know there's a lining. Okay, we're gonna pretend this cotton material is the outer fabric. I am going to use this material as the interface, and then I'm going to just use another piece as the lining. Okay. Now, when we layer these things, if we just left this cotton as it is, these two, look how flimsy. This would not be a quality product because there's nothing to stiffen this up. We can use fusible fleece, which means we iron on, you know, with the glue side. If you haven't seen that video, go ahead and take a look at the different types of interfaces in the video that I have. But you can get interface that has glue on one side, or you can get interface that does not have glue on one side. At the end of the bolts, those normally say sew on, okay? If it's fusible, at the end of the bolt in the store, you'll see a picture of an iron, okay? Or if it doesn't have a picture of an iron, then you'll just feel the bubbles, the bumps on the top, on the underside of the interface. Okay, so because this does not have any glue, it means that I purposely chose this because I want to do a quilting project. And I want to, you know, save money instead of buying the iron-on, the adhesive, the fusible interface. So I'm going to layer this, okay? You should know, though, that sometimes when you purchase interface, okay, some of it is not thick enough to stand your product up. Like if you make a bag, you'll have to put a piece of cardboard or something and then cover that cardboard, you know, at the bottom, you cover it, you know, with fabric to make it look nice. But for the purpose of this video, I want to show you what quilting is. Now, this is one layer here, okay? So when you quilt, quilting simply means I am going to attach top layer to my interface and then the bottom layer, okay? Sometimes, like in here, okay, the lining is attached to the interface and the top. You can see the stitch lines here, okay? Sometimes they quilt only the top part with just the interface. This is a quicker method of sewing your product, okay? Which is why people actually do the top, the interface, and the bottom. Okay, so when you quilt, you put it underneath your machine and you use regular stitching, or you can drop your dog feeds and do free motion quilting, which that's a whole separate video, the free motion quilting, dropping the dog feeds. But for right now, I'm going to show you, you could either do straight lines, okay, which, you know, we'll do that. I'm going to line up my fabric here with the end. I purposely left a little bit of this out for the video because I wanted to talk about it, okay? Always cut your interface, whatever you're using, a tad bit wider than your outer and inner fabric, okay? So I'm lining my material up with the end of my foot. Now, when you are using several layers, you might want to use your walking foot, okay? Walking foot is good for these things. But because I only have the one layer, I'm just going to use my regular foot, okay? I'm right now sewing on 3.0 for my stitching. But what I want to do, okay, I'm right now at my stitch width. It's at 0.0. I'm going to bump this up, okay, to 0.5. Matter of fact, I'm going to bump it up to 1.0. And what this means is that I want my stitches to be a little bit wider, and I want them to be a little further apart. So the 3.0, so originally it's 2.5, and the stitches are really tiny. I want to make those stitches a little bigger. You can see that here. And now I'm telling the machine, space them out a little bit. Okay, and the reason you want to do that is because you want to give your needle enough time to pick up and go through the thick layers there that you're going to be quilting through in order to push back down inside to grab the fabric and push back up. And you want to make it separate those stitches, you know, a little bit, the spacing, so that your tension doesn't mess up. Okay, so, and the tension on the top is at 3.5. So when I started, I did not put my my needle far back. Okay, I left the fabric right underneath the foot, and I just backstitch now. Okay, so now I'm going to start. I'm sewing a regular line, and I purposely chose this color thread. Well, I should say I chose this color fabric because I already had that thread in there, but I chose this because I wanted you to see the stitching. Okay, so what I'm doing, all I'm doing right now is I'm sewing a straight line. That's all. When you quilt, what you want to do is make sure that you, one, have even spaces between your material. Okay, you want to make sure that you have even spaces, okay, between your lines. Okay, in this situation, she went diagonal. We're going to do that on the next example. You can go diagonal, but you want to make sure that you have even spaces. So we can see right here, look at this. This is just about, this is an inch apart, the lines. Okay, this is going to make sure that the material inside, I'm just going to mark this here with my roller. This is my marking tool. Okay, it's going to make sure that, okay, it's going to hold down that interface on that side, but now we want to give lines for the quilting so that it holds down the rest of the way. You cannot just sew one portion, you can't just sew around the perimeter, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. Okay, so here I go again. Sewing. So this one, like I said, I'm just doing 1 inch approximate because I'm not sewing super straight, but 1 inch lines, right? And now so far what's happening is that, look at this. If this were my full bag or whatever it was I'm sewing, right? I know that, look, this interface is not going to shift there because look, this stitch line is stopping it, and it's not going to shift from here. So I know that right now that's being held in place. So let's go another inch. Okay, I'm not using my ruler, so I'm just estimating here. Okay, going back again. I'm backstitching. And it's okay if you go off on your stitching, because remember, this is, you know, this is going to be underneath the zipper or at the bottom, you know, so it doesn't matter how this looks right now. Okay, same thing again. Okay, now the reason that you need to make sure that your stitch line here, your stitches, you want to make sure that these are not at 0, 0. And if you played with your machine, you'd see this, but there is spacing. There's a gap between my stitches. I can see it. I don't know if you can, but I made the stitches longer and the space between them longer. You probably would never notice it on your machine unless you actually sewed a line at 2.5 and then, you know, sewed another line at 3.0 and then 3.5. Then you'd notice. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go again. So what this is doing essentially is it is holding this interface in place so that you give your bag or whatever it is you're sewing, zipper pouch, your bag, so that you give it body and so that it holds that interface in place. So right now, you see, so this is a form of quilting. Now, when you're choosing designs, you could choose to go across. I mean, you know, you could do whatever you want to. I mean, you know, she decided to, you know, put diamonds on all of her bags, you know. What you're doing what you're doing is stopping your bag from moving, and you're giving it support. Okay. If you did not sew these lines, okay, this is where the type of interface that you use will be important. The glue-on one will be important, the fusible one. It would also be important on the outside of your bag that you might want to put a pocket on the outside of the bag, because that pocket, when it adheres to the full piece of fabric, just putting that pocket down is going to make sure that the bag doesn't shift, because that portion that you sew here where the pocket is, it's going to hold it to that whole big piece of material that the pocket is on top of. Okay. I'm going to put this to the side for a minute. Let's grab this one. Okay. So notice those squares. And again, you know, these are diagonal diamonds. It's however you want to do it. Straight lines. I did squares. That interface is not moving anywhere because it's secured that way. It's secured this way. Okay. So this is going to be strong. It's just more work if you don't get the iron on, fusible fleece. I mean, you know, it saves you money, but you know, you're spending it in labor. Okay, I'm putting 2 layers now, 2 layers of this interface, right? And of course, I was just using scrap, so it's not even. Now, you see what's happened? Now it's thicker, okay? And I did this for a reason, because I want to show you the stitching, the difference with the stitching. If we left the stitching the same, what you're essentially doing to your machine is you're making your machine work harder. You're making your machine try to dig down into this fabric. If I chose, let me do a line here. Okay. I'm going to leave this as it is at 3.0 and 1.0 for my distance. Okay. So already I can feel the difference that my machine is having to work harder to pull this fabric through, because like I said, I'm not using my walking foot right now. I'm using this one, but this has to go all the way down through these layers to get the thread from the bobbin. And so you see it's curling. You see this right here? It's actually curling up on its own because of the tightness. Okay, the stitching is tight and it's forcing the material to curve. Okay, now this, I don't know if you see it. Let me do one more line and then you'll be able to see how it's dug deep inside of there. Hold on, I'm gonna do one more line. And of course you would clip it, you know, use some clips to hold it down, but this doesn't shift at all, so that's why I'm not pinning it or clipping it. Okay, so if you can see, you see how it curled up? If you choose a thick, like the fusible foam, you see how it curls up with the thickness? Okay, so now what I've done by not making my stitch lines wider, okay, and changing the length of the stitches, so the spacing and the length, I've curled my material because, yeah, that needle is working harder and it's digging down. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to, because I have multiple layers here, I am going to move my stitch length up to 3.5. Okay, I'm going to leave it right here for a minute at 1.0. That 1.0 is how big I want, the distance that I want those stitches to be from each other. Okay, so I'm going to leave that at 3.5, and then I'm going to show you backstitching. So already it's flattening out. So look at the difference so far in the width of the stitches, the width of them. Okay, you see this, that size, and this size. But I could tell that it was not curling up. So it was not being forced to go a certain way, which ultimately then makes the bag look ugly, because then guess what? It's almost going to be like it's shrinking the material. Okay. So I'm now going to leave it on 3.5, but I'm going to bump that space up a little bit more to 1.5. Okay. Now this is only when you have multiple layers that you need to bump it up like that. If you only have one layer for the bag, that's fine. Okay. Okay. So, and if you are going to use 2 layers, remember, just use your walking foot. Look at that line. Okay, so big difference. My machine did not work hard at all with this. That's at the 3.5 and 1.5. So you see, you can actually start to see the spacing there in between the stitches. Your machine works less. It's not pulling from the top up here, trying to get that thread, trying to get it from the spool fast enough to get down there when you actually have it on the proper stitch lengths. Okay. So the reason that I was saying before that it's okay if your tension is left, if your interface is left out, is because when you're all done, okay, because it will shift as you sew, okay, when you're changing your lines, shifting your lines. When you're all done, then you go to your product and then you just cut it off so that you have all of your lines even. Okay. And then you can attach, like your zipper or whatever it is that you are doing, whether or not you're going to make a top for a drawstring bag, or whatever it is you're doing. Okay. And of course there's my bottom, but what you want to do is complete both parts, both sides of your bag or your product first, so that when you do cut the excess interface off, your 2 pieces are even. Because if you just cut one off, it's going, cut one first and then the other, it's going to actually change the size of your bag. They're not going to be even, which means your seams are not going to be even. So if you have a mat, my mat's over there, but if you have your mat and your flat ruler, go ahead and you take your rotary cutter and, even out both of your ends. So, yeah, and you can put, once you actually quilt your material together like this, then you can go ahead and create your product the way you originally were going to do. And you no longer need to put, any interface, you don't need to put anything else with your interface. You actually don't even have to put any more lining, because your lining is here. So this is, a quick way for you to finish your bag, finish your product that you're doing, the bag or product. So, yeah, don't force your machine to work harder. Okay. The thicker the material you're using, bump up your stitch length, bump up the distance there, both of them. Okay. So, for the thickness of it, and for the distance, the distance between your stitches. When you have completed your first piece, your first side that you're going to create your project with, when you set that to the side, just know that you have the 2 thin layers, the cotton and the lining, and then you have the interface. Okay. Let me show you something. I'm just going to cut this. We're going to use this as an example. We're going to make pretend this is one side of your bag and this is the other side of your bag. Okay. When you are going to sew these 2 together, so you should have both parts completed. Let me just add some stitches here. Okay, I'm going to just put some across, just Okay. That's good enough. This one here, I want to put it. Okay. Okay, so when you go to put these pieces together, keep in mind you have two completed pieces together. When you put these together, they're not going to shift or anything, okay? But what you need to do is you need to help out your machine. When you put your pieces together, we're going to make pretend these are right sides facing each other. They're squished together thinner now because they've been flattened by the quilting. The quilting has helped flatten it. But you need to help out your machine so that, like I said, that thread is not trying to be pulled from the top spool. And so here's what you want to do. I always sew with my tension at, between 3 and 4. I keep it at, 3.5. Help it out a little, okay? You're going to turn it to 4. And what that's going to do, it's going to make it a little bit easier for this spool to let go of the thread that's on the top. It's going to say, okay, let me loosely let some out, so that, again, if it was on a smaller number, it's really tight. It's holding on to it tightly. Okay, we want to be nice to the machine and say, I want you to work less. Okay, so you make that a little looser. Okay, and remember to bump up those stitches. Okay, so let's work on 3.5 or 4.0. Okay, and you're gonna have to try this out on a little scrap first. But 4.0. So now we want it to be larger than the 3.5 that we were sewing on before. Okay, because now we're going through these thick layers there. Okay, so 4.0, let's see. Okay, and you don't need any other thing to sew your product together at this point. I'm backstitching. Ooh, that came out nice. You see? So you see, look at your stitches there. All right, you need to help out the machine. Look, of course, I didn't line this up, because I was doing, just for the video. But look, I didn't stress my machine. I didn't, I didn't pull it. It just glided right through the machine. Okay, so start off, like I said, when you're doing your regular one layer, your one layer of interface first, you're going to start off, at 3.0. And then when you get to the point where you're ready to combine those two, help out your machine. Okay, so this is on 4.0. My tension is up to 4. I separated the stitches a little more, so the stitch distance is at 2.0. You can see that distance there. Okay, but so that's one layer. So that's all for right now. That's quilting. Maybe, I don't know, maybe I'll do a quilting project soon. I mean, I don't normally use the quilting method, but it could be something new. So okay, yeah, and you can use squares, you can use diagonal lines, whatever it is, whatever shape you want to do on actual big quilts. That's why you see, on the huge quilts that go on the bed, when they're doing squiggly lines, if you don't have a long arm, you can do it, which is called quilt as you go, where you actually just quilt on small pieces, maybe 10 by 10, 12 by 12s. You do the individual quilting on the pieces, piece by piece as you go, and then you piece the ends together. But you do it so that the interface doesn't shift, and so that when you wash the material, when you wash the bag or the quilt, that this is not, free inside of the, just floating inside of the item. So, but that's about all for now. Discussing quilting. So join me for the next video where you're going to learn how to do an applique if you don't know already. So, all right. Thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. Bye.